hosted by Mike, the Big Cheese.
Because honestly, like, if I can't figure something out, I just get my 15-year-old son. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, and he's like, oh, just do this month. Luckily, it's funny because my husband, who is my drummer, is far less tech savvy than I am. Like, honestly, like, he still goes, how do I upload this video to Facebook? I just don't know what. And I'm like, come on, you've been on Facebook for a decade and you don't know what you're doing. Like, it's like, anyway, it's funny to me, but because I'm recording and engineering and doing a lot of stuff with digital technology in terms of music software, it's actually been a good education for me because I'm not too much of a tech dummy, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we come from a generation where we bought cassettes, we bought records, you went home, you put them on, and you played them. It's a whole nother world today with streaming and everything's done on the internet and the singles. I mean, in a way, it's kind of gone back to the 50s where singles are more important than the records today sometimes. It's a whole new world especially for music.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think certainly for the younger generation of kids coming up, that it's a very soundbite style world where, like, when you say singles are important, yeah, like a single comes and a single goes in 48 hours,
Yeah.
and then they're on to the next thing because it's such a everybody's attention span is so short, which is a little bit sad. Luckily for me, my record buying audience is between 40 and 60 years old, and they still want to buy physical product. Like, my fans are so excited that I've got a vinyl coming out right now, because it's important to, a more mature generation to, I think, actually own a physical piece of product and enjoy a body of work as a whole entity, right? And so I feel very fortunate that, um, you know, in terms of that, I still keep getting offered distribution deals around the world because people go, Lee Aaron, we know we'll sell some records, right?
Yeah, I mean, as an artist and as a musician, does it make it difficult for you? Because, like you said, they do have short attention spans today. Even a lot of adults do. So, as an artist, you say, I have to kind of hit it right away, get them, draw them in within like the first couple of notes. So, when you're writing, does that play into like your writing style, where you're saying we got to grab these people, or do you just write the way you've always written?
That's an interesting question. No one's actually framed it to me that way before. Oh, dang it. Sorry.
That's
I
okay.
Daisy, please be quiet. I I live on acreage property. I'm just giving you a little side of what's going on in my world today here. I live on acreage property, and my husband and I are still living here because we have a big, beautiful house. We love it. We have a massive vinyl library, like literally built into a former helicopter garage.
Wow.
We don't want to move, and they're building all around me. And right now, they're falling trees. The last couple of days, they've been in the properties next door to me. So I'm trying to do Zoom interviews yesterday, and I'm hearing like next door, like, and they're like literally cutting down trees. And now somebody's ringing my doorbell, probably because they're wanting to cut trees close to my property.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to answer because I'm working, and I'm doing Zoom calls right now or whatever. So yes, but anyway, no. In terms of your question about does that play into how I'm writing? No. And I'll tell you why. Because anytime, even in the past, when back in the 80s when we were signed to, big record labels and they were spending $250,000 on your albums, and they were like your investor and they had a say in your music, I would, have meetings with the label and they would go, oh, Bon Jovi's got a big hit right now, or this artist has Garbage has a big hit and we want you to write more like this. I felt like I really got sidetracked from my authentic path when I was listening to too many outside voices in terms of how I should be writing. So, no, I don't do that. And yes, I realize it's a soundbite world, but I have a ballad on my album that's almost 6 minutes long, and I was like, I don't care. We thought of, should we edit this for a video single or a radio, and we thought no, because it destroys the integrity of the song. And so our feeling was no, we're not going to do that. And I feel at some point it's got to come back around where young people just get sick of this programmed 3.5 minute song world with pitch correction, you know?
Yeah.
And I, you know, in terms of striving to always write better material, I am always trying to do that. And, you know, I know that in some hard rock circles, I have been criticized for writing a pop hook into my music because, you know, something, oh my gosh, if there's a catchy chorus, it resonates, you remember it after you hear it and you can
Yeah.
sing along with it. Well, I don't think that's a crime. I think that's the art of good song crafting. And I'm always striving to be a better song crafter.
I agree. I mean, people can span your whole career going back to the early 80s with the Leanne Project, the Metal Queen, Call of the Wild, to when you were doing jazz ones like the 2000s with Slick Chick. I mean, you've never stood to one thing. You've always like experimented. You've gone into different genres of music. And me personally, as a fan, even though I'm a heavy metal person, I love that music and what you did early on. I followed your whole career in every album you've ever put out, and I went along for the ride because it was still you. No matter what style or genre you were doing, it was still Lee Aaron. There was always your touch to everything that you did, and that's what made your music about you.
Well, thank you. I'd like to think that everything had the Lee Aaron stamp on it, but you know, what a lot of hard rock and metal fans don't understand is that when I was doing that, there was two reasons I did that diversion into exploring jazz and blues. And I even did an opera at one point because I love rock, I love Tommy, like I loved rock operas too, like
Yeah,
so this opera that I did was almost like a rock opera. It was set during the French Revolution, and it was about the the Marquis de Sade and all the his imprisonment and how he had destroyed so many lives. It was a very emotional opera. It was really cool. Um, but when I did that diversion, two things had happened in the late 90s was that anybody who was attached to, their name was attached to corporate rock or hair metal from the late 80s or early 90s, you couldn't get arrested, as we all know, at that point in time
yeah.
because grunge had taken over the airwaves and the media, and nobody wanted to hear about it. So I thought this is a good time to just do something a little bit off the beaten path that's an artistic diversion I want to do. And number two, unlike many hard rock fans thought, oh, she's completely abandoned us. She's not, she hasn't pledged the allegiance to hard rock anymore, and she's gone off and she's done jazz. It's like, well, who do you think Jimi Hendrix listened to? Who do you think, you know, the Pete Townsend listened to? Who do you think Jimmy Page listened to before they plugged their guitars in and turned them up to 11? They were listening to Howlin' Wolf and Chuck Berry and all of this old blues stuff,
Yeah.
and that was the roots of rock and roll. These were their influences, and I was very curious about. I wanted to I wanted to explore the music that my heroes were influenced by, and that is why I went back and explored that genre of music. I didn't look at it like it was defecting from the rock camp. I looked at it as an education, and I wish people could see it that way. You know what I mean? So I think it's made me a far better singer, songwriter, and producer, all around artist and musician.
Sure. I mean, you're talking 20 years in between, that change. It didn't happen overnight. Did the fact that, hard rock and hair metal and the rest of them did kind of fall by the wayside make it a lot easier for you to make that decision to try something new? Because a lot of people be afraid to lose their fan base, and that's a hard thing to give up when you make it to a certain level.
Except the reality, let's be honest, everybody was struggling. Even the biggest hard rock
Yeah.
artists were struggling at that point in time because you literally could not get arrested. It was the new school, and nobody wanted to hear about it. And you know, so a lot of your, how do I explain it? You might have had a loyal fan base, but good luck getting a record company to get behind you
Yeah.
to reach that fan base. It was very difficult at that point in time. So yeah, I looked at it as it was a perfect timing, perfect opportunity to just do something completely off the beaten path. Believe me, I didn't do it for money because there is no money in jazz. You know, it was, it was pure artistic exploration, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm glad that you came back around in, 2016 with Fire and Gasoline. It was a great rockin' record, almost a family affair. And then Diamond Baby Blues. I mean, that took me back to like the 60s, the 70s. That classic, rock and blues album. It was such a deep record to me. I mean, such a full-sounded album. And now with Radio 1, you're rocking again. But when I heard 21, it kind of made me sad. It's such a beautiful song, but it made me feel really old. I gotta be honest with you. I started thinking about my whole life. I don't know if that was the point of the song. I know there's other meanings to it about being 21, but to me, I felt like, the end is getting near, and I wish I was 21 again.
Well, you know what? If it captured like if that song tugged at your heartstrings and made you feel nostalgic for your youth, that's what it was supposed to do.
Yeah,
I was feeling that way when I wrote it, not that I feel old. In fact, it's funny because you notice things like I recently had to start, wearing orthotics in my stage boots because I've got these issues with my big toe joints because from all my years of jumping around and stomping around in high heels on stage. And my doctor said, um, he said it's not really that it's part of it is a little bit of age, but most of it is you've just destroyed your feet from
yeah.
being kind of like stage dancer all your life, right? And I'm like, crap, and so little things like that, you go, man, okay, that is a sign of my age, the fact that I have to put orthotics in my stage boots now. But in my mind, I still feel like I'm in my 20s in terms of my where my brain is at. Like I talk to my friends back in Toronto, like I live in Vancouver now, and we might go a year or two without talking, but it's like we've never skipped a beat. We get on the phone and I'm like, dude, how you doing? Like, it's like we're still in our 20s. And so my heart feels that way. And I know that so many of my fans and my that have grown up with me feel exactly that way. And so that 21 was kind of a love letter to them in that way, remembering our youth, but also taking comfort in how far we've actually come and the fact that we've survived these trials and tribulations. Relationships come and relationships break up, and I've lost two of my very best friends. One passed away from cancer, the other passed away from a brain tumor, well, which was also cancer, but and they weren't old. One was in her 40s,
Wow.
and but I mean, life is this journey of joy and heartbreak, and that's what 21 is supposed to make you feel.
It really did. I mean, when you think about it, would you ever really want to go back to the age of 21? I mean, I say yes, yes sometimes because I know I'm getting closer towards the end now, and I'd like to get those 30, 40 years back. But in reality, I don't think I'd ever want to go back to that time outside of a quick memory because my life is here now with my family and my grandchildren and my kids, and it's a whole different world right now. But do you ever feel like you'd like to go back to that time for any reason in particular?
Um, to be honest with you, no. I
Yeah,
mean, I, would I like to relive some of the great memories? Yeah. Because I think I would appreciate them far more. Back then we were just young and stupid, and it was like when I was, tooling around Italy on a motorbike and going, wow, this is so cool, and let's stop and have a beer. I don't think I would have done that. I would have gone, let's just soak this in and enjoy it more. You know,
yeah.
I think that, um, so I think I would have appreciated those things more, but no, my life is great. Like again, I'm happily married. I've got, you know, teen children. They're 15 and my daughter just turned 17. Holy crap, when did that happen? You
Yeah.
know, um, I'm not a grandma yet, but I've got teen kids and I love my family and I'm so much more smarter and more smarter. That was that was good English. Yeah. So, but I'm no, I'm just so much more wise, and I just have a different worldview now, and I wish I had that perspective when I was young, right?
Yeah.
I feel like I've got so much left to do, but I might not have as much time as I thought I had to do it. So I just feel like I'm in a whole new creative phase, if that makes sense. I know that was a
Absolutely.
little off topic, but after hard rock sort of fell apart, and I took a diversion and did jazz and blues for a while. Then I got married and I had my kids. And so when I came back in 2016, I think my kids were 8 and 10 at that time. And I was like, finally, enough creative space opened up in my life for me to make another record and get writing and recording again. Because up until that point, I was just, lost in the throes of early motherhood. As you know, it's pretty intense, right?
Yeah.
When your kids are little.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, in the last 5 years, I mean, four records, including the Christmas one, almost Christmas from last year, that's a tremendous output for 5. It's almost like the old days where you'd put out a record, go out on tour, put out a record on a yearly basis. That's a lot of music for 5 years. I mean, was this stuff that's been building up in you for the last decade that you finally were able to get out, or was it all relatively, songs that were just written at the time?
Well, a little bit of both. When Fire and Gasoline, I had some songs that I was had been working on, although it was very hard to find the creative energy when my kids were little. And you forgot about the live album. I put out Power Soul Rock and Roll live in
Yes.
Germany in 2019, so it's actually five.
Yeah.
And then and I've got more than half of a new album written already because of COVID. I have nothing else to do.
Yeah. Oh, well, at least this album's coming out at a good time because at least here in the U.S., I mean, things are opening up again. Shows are starting to happen. Venues are starting to, book bands again. So I don't know how it is in Canada. I know a lot of things in Europe are still kind of on lockdown. But, hopefully you'll be able to get out and play live. Is there anything that you have actually planned already or you're hoping that will happen?
Well, I had some European shows for the fall, but they all got pushed into 2022 because they're just starting to think about opening the border here in July, and only for people that are double vaccinated.
Yeah.
You have to have a COVID passport. You have to have a COVID test before you go down. Um, and it's tentative. Like, so Canada's a little bit behind. I may have a few shows in the fall here, but I think it's going to roll out very slowly. Canadian bands in Canada and socially distanced to start. So,
Yeah. We'll get there. Hopefully, by the end of the year, things will sort of be back to normal for everybody
yeah.
and we get out and play again. Early on, you were talking about like the early days, how like, the record companies sort of had control and management. It's a whole different music business today where most artists have complete control over everything that they do, from their own labels to distribution if they can. If not, they find, other labels to work with for that. Do you prefer the business model the way it is today? I mean, you can go back to the 80s and say, well, a label threw out that money behind you for the record, tour support, distribution. So you had a lot of that, business stuff taken care of for you, where today you're on your own. But today you also have complete control. You probably wouldn't do none of the things you did back in the 80s if you weren't told to do it by a label, probably.
I really like the business model today, much better. You know, it's no secret in the very early infancy stages of my career when I signed with my first manager when I was 20, no, sorry, 17.
Wow.
Between 17 and 21, I definitely made some missteps I wish I hadn't made in terms of, just allowing myself to be talked into some fairly questionable marketing. I mean, that was kind of the agenda in the early, the mid 80s to late 80s was let's market all these female rockers like sex kittens, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And I was certainly pushed into that mold. And as were many of us, even Hart went off, got a little sidetracked and into, low cut cleavage and big hair and
yeah.
all that stuff in the 80s because there was a real mandate to market us like that. Um, it was, and especially in hard rock, it was probably one of the more sexist genres. And, so, and it's, I mentioned that a record company was like your investor in the 80s. They were spending, a $500,000 to make your record, hire world-class producers, promote it, spend money on videos and marketing. And believe me, they had a lot to say about the product because they were paying for it,
Sure.
right? So those contracts were designed not to let our artists have complete artistic control. So I was involved in the creation of the music and the material, but quite often I would write 40, 50 songs, and the label would pick the 12 that went on the record. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And um, I had a big battle with my label over on Some Girls Do over the single "Sex with Love" being released as a single, because because of the heavily sexist marketing, I said I just think it's going to be misunderstood. It's a song about monogamy, and having deep caring feelings for someone before you get into bed with them. That's what the song is about. But they were like, oh, the word sex is in it, let's just and so, and I think it was misunderstood. And even Metal Queen was it was a feminist empowerment song. That's what the whole impetus of that message was. But I think it was lost because I was sandwiched in between sexy girls in bikinis washing the cars of rock stars being sprayed down with hoses, and Wasp that had a topless woman on stage with a bag over her head. So people were just like, oh, and so nowadays I can completely control the messaging. I completely control how I'm marketed. I have complete control over the material that ends up on the album. I'm the producer. I hire the team of people around me that I want to help me create my finished product, from art direction to, well, I am the art director, but I mean from a graphic designer to work with to do my cover and artwork, to my mixer. I hired Mike Fraser as my mixer on this record, which was amazing. Like, he's just an amazing talent. And then I go to the label and I go, here's your finished product. Let's work together to market it and distribute it.
It's amazing how, like, over 4 decades, how the business has changed. And some people say, why didn't you speak up back then? Why didn't you say anything? But people that aren't in the business don't realize how difficult that could be. And there were bands that were led by, at least on stage, by these strong big men that you thought were the toughest people in the world, that caved into what the record labels and managers wanted to do, because they knew that if they wanted to further their career, if they wanted to make it happen, you kind of had to go along with it, whether you liked it or not. It was probably a very difficult position to be in.
Especially as a woman.
Yeah.
I would like to think, I'd love it for someone to write a big article about how all of us women in the 80s that were battling against that, the suits and ties with their ideas and the sexist marketing, we kind of paved the way, I think, for women in the 90s, even like, say, a Shirley Manson from Garbage, who is only a couple years older than I am, but she came out in a different time frame, in a different music culture of grunge, where suddenly it was acceptable for women to pick up guitars and have angry messages, and suddenly they were respected as players and songwriters and message makers, whereas we were doing that in the 80s, late 80s. I was certainly, and again, like I told you, Metal Queen was an angry statement about female empowerment, and but because of the culture in which it was released, it wasn't really appreciated. That message, that narrative, didn't really reach the public the way it should have at the time. But that seems to be changing now, and I get a chance to talk about it. So
No, you're right. I mean, over the last 15 years, there's probably been more female-fronted rock bands or all-female groups than ever. And if I had to ask them that same question, half of them would say, I don't know, I never really experienced that, because it is a different world today. And I'm glad for that, because nobody should have to go through anything to be an artist, to produce music, and have to, be put in that kind of position.
well, it's funny because I stumbled across something on the internet the other day, and I questioned whether I should post it as a throwback, because it was myself, some of the girls from Girl School, Rock Goddess from the UK,
Yeah.
and a few other 80s females that I can't even remember. And we had done a photo shoot at Christmas time with Ray Palmer, who was one of the top Kerrang photographers at the time. And it was all of us girls with a bunch of, tinsel and stuff all over us, and it was entitled Christmas Tarts. How we allowed that? Like, we did the photo. They wanted to do a Christmas photo. We all agreed to it, but nobody told us we were going to be called Christmas Tarts in the magazine.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
absolutely.
But somehow that was acceptable then, right?
It kind of was. You think about it now, it's kind of weird, but back then nobody even thought twice about it. I mean, was there anything you did back in the day, like you took a photo shoot, you recorded something, and then years later you did see what they did with it, say, I don't remember that happening. And it's like the Christmas card type of story. Was there anything more advanced than that where you said, holy cow, look what they did to me? They converted this whole thing around to something else.
Well, yeah, truthfully, one thing that's a little bit embarrassing is I did, uh, and I've only got a couple more minutes here to talk,
Okay.
sorry, Mike, but just Nathan tends to book half an hour blocks for me, which I
Yes.
feel like I need 45 minutes to do a full interview, and he never seems to do that for me. But anyway, um, yeah, so um, I did, I think it was either the Papa Ringi Festival or Heavy Metal Belgium in 1985. And one of the things that I used to wear on stage now, and it wasn't necessarily, I didn't look at it like an 80s statement, but I started out singing in theater when I was young. So I got very comfortable wearing sort of dance skin bodysuits because it was kind of the choice of theater people. We wore them for singing and dancing in theater. So when I graduated into being in a rock band and I wanted something comfortable to wear on stage that I could literally wash out in a hotel room sink because we never got a chance to stop and do our laundry,
Yeah.
right? This is the way the world was. So I sort of adapted that lycra bodysuit to my hard rock wear, and I would sort of decorate it up with studded belts, and my I had my own sort of vibe, right? So when I had a bright red one that I used to wear in the 80s, and so um, I wore them for comfort, not because I thought they were sexy, you know. And it's not like they were overly low cut, and they literally covered me from my chest to my toes. And when I played this festival, there was a bunch of live fashion photographers in the or sorry, rock photographers in the front, and a couple of them just literally took pictures of my ass
Oh,
in this bodysuit, and that ended up being, while there were photos of me on stage, full performance, there were some photos that were literally just of my private parts. And I was like, how is that acceptable? Like nowadays, I would think you could actually sue a magazine for
you
doing
probably
something
could. Yeah.
with the Me Too movement, you know? And we, just women of the 80s, we had to endure a lot of that. And it wasn't acceptable. It totally wasn't. But anyway, I'm ranting on, and I don't
That's
want this to be the
that's
focus of this.
okay.
I want the
No,
focus to Radio On, the new album, which is totally rocking, and I'm so excited about it. And I can't wait for people to hear it because I think it's funny. I talked to a journalist yesterday, and he said, I think your albums just keep getting better and better. And I'm like,
they
thank
are.
you, you know?
They really are. I'm not going to keep you. I know you have someone else waiting in about a minute or two. But, Radio On, July 23rd, just about a month away officially before it comes out. I'm looking forward to many more records from you over the years. I've been a fan since the very beginning, and I'll always be able to support you no matter what you do.
So thank you so much, Mike. It was a pleasure to talking to you, and I hope we get a chance to talk to again real soon.
I will. Thank you. Have a great day. Take care.
Okay,
Bye
take
bye.
care. Bye bye.